Welcome back for another deep dive.
Today, we are going to be...
Talking about Raymond Carver.
Oh, yeah.
You know, kind of considered by a lot of people to be like the short story writer.
Right.
Especially when you think about like minimalism.
Yeah.
And we were kind of thinking about this because there's this article talking about whether there's room for like, I don't know.
Tricks, I guess.
Tricks?
In good literature.
Yeah. Is it really good if you need tricks?
Right? Like, is it really good?
Yeah.
Or is it just like straightforward storytelling, the key?
That's right.
What do you think?
Well, it's a fascinating question.
And I think it gets right to the heart of, you know, what we even mean when we say something is good writing.
Yeah.
Because I feel like...
We've all heard that advice, like...
kill your darlings and all that kind of stuff.
And just like, get rid of...
Get rid of the stuff that's not serving the story.
Yeah.
But like, what if the things that we're calling darlings are like...
experimental
techniques or like weird structures, like
unconventional,
yeah, like surprising,
unexpected
things.
And it's especially interesting, I think, when we're talking about somebody like Raymond Carver,
because he was so associated with that like pared back minimalist style.
Oh, right.
So it's almost like, you know,
to even say the word tricks next to his name feels kind of off.
It feels sacrilegious a little bit. Like,
yeah.
This is the guy who said...
get in, get out, don't linger.
Yes, that's right.
Like, he wanted every word to count, you know?
He did. Every word had to be doing work. No decorative, no fuss, no muss.
And that's what made his impact so huge, right?
I mean, he really did redefine what a short story could be.
By stripping it down to its barest essentials.
Right. So
we've established, like...
Carver as like the, you know...
the champion of minimalist storytelling.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this article is saying...
there's this other side to this.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because it's the author Stuart Evers...
is a self-proclaimed fan of what he calls literary tricks.
Okay.
He loves writers like Donald Bartham,
Lawrence Stern, B.S. Johnson.
Names that might not be familiar to everyone listening, but...
really kind of push the boundaries of what a novel or short story...
could be.
I love that, though.
It's like we start with Carver.
And we're already, like, down this rabbit hole of,
right.
like, experimental writing.
And, like, should it be taken seriously?
And it's not just a theoretical debate.
Because, remember, a few years back...
Carver's original unedited manuscript.
For what we talk about when we talk about love was published.
Oh, yeah.
As beginners.
And it's significantly different.
Oh, wow.
Okay, well, hold on before we get into that.
Why does this guy...
what is Evers like?
Tricks so much.
Yeah, what is the...
He gives this example, Legend of a Suicide.
Have you read that?
I have, yeah. It's a great example. It's a good book, and it's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
It's got that, like, you know, on the surface...
yeah, it's very Carver-esque.
The prose is really stark and, like...
a really kind of intimate focus on the characters. But then he introduces this element. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
But it totally changes how you read.
Everything that came before it. Interesting. So he like plays with your expectations a little bit.
He totally plays with your expectations, exactly.
Evers thinks that that's what makes it work.
It's not about just being gimmicky.
It's about like finding new ways.
To engage the reader and make them really...
think about their assumptions.
And
actually feel the story on a deeper level.
Yeah.
That makes sense. But I mean, I guess I wonder, like...
isn't there a danger of it being too much?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, like anything. Too much of a good thing.
You can definitely go too far with it.
I've definitely read books where it's like...
okay, I get it. You're very clever.
Right, exactly.
Show off.
But when it's done well, it's not about being clever. It's about...
adding another layer of meaning to the story.
It's like...
it's like a magician who uses misdirection, not to fool you, but to...
enhance the illusion, you know?
You know something's happening.
Right.
But you don't know what it is, and it makes that final reveal all that more powerful.
Interesting. So it's less about tricking and more about just like...
surprising? Or like...
yeah, I think so.
Challenging the reader.
Challenging them, yeah.
And it's interesting you should say challenge because...
I think that is a big part of what this Evers guy...
really seems to admire about these writers.
They're not afraid to make the reader work a little, you know...
to meet them halfway.
And that kind of active reading can be really rewarding.
So it's less about spoon-feeding the reader and more about, like...
inviting them to, like, participate in the process.
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
And that kind of brings us back to beginners.
And this Carver paradox that we were talking about.
Because here's the guy who's like, get in, get out, don't linger, like famously.
Yeah.
And yet the original manuscript of this book is like
full of stuff that got cut.
so much longer.
It's like messier and I don't know, it's just like
More
experimental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Because it makes you wonder, like,
What if those editorial choices, the cuts that made his work,
into those minimalist masterpieces that we know and love.
what if those were actually tricks in and of themselves?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that the Carver that we know,
Who, like we said, famously rejected all this, was actually a product of, like,
editorial intervention.
it's possible, yeah.
And it really makes you think about like authorial intent.
And the role of editors and even how we define
Writer style.
It's like that whole thing of like,
Did Michelangelo really see the David and the marble?
that's a great way to put it.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And with beginners, we have this opportunity to compare the two.
You've got the raw material and you got the finished product.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not even just a question of whether tricks are valid.
It's a question of how they're used.
Right.
And who gets to decide what those are.
And who gets to make those decisions?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, it makes you wonder how many other writers
Even ones who we don't think of as experimental.
might have stories that would totally change.
How we see their work.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about why Evers likes tricks.
We've talked about, like, the Carver paradox.
But like, what about the downsides of experimental writing?
like, there have to be some.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's like anything else too much of a good thing can kind of backfire on you.
Right.
I've definitely read books where it's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, you're trying too hard.
Yeah, you're trying to be like the next James Joyce or something.
Right, exactly.
And it just ends up being more confusing than like compelling.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe where that minimalist thing comes in.
You know, that Carver-esque approach.
It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful stories are sold, you know, simply and directly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's less about picking a side,
Like minimalism versus...
experimentalism,
Right.
and more about just like,
Finding that sweet spot, I guess.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Because ultimately, every writer's got to find their own voice, right?
Right.
Their own way of connecting with the reader.
And sometimes that means, you know, embracing the unexpected.
Pushing the boundaries a little bit.
Yeah. And that's what's so cool about books and writing and stuff.
It's like always changing.
It's always evolving. Yeah.
Always pushing the limits.
Absolutely. And even if it doesn't work,
Even if a trick falls flat on its face.
there's still something to be learned from it, you know?
Yeah.
It's all part of that conversation.
Right. It's all part of like
Yeah.
figuring out what makes a story.
Good.
What makes it resonate.
What makes us stay with us?
Yeah.
Okay. So where does that leave us?
On this whole tricks thing, because I feel like we've gone in a circle,
Maybe we have. Yeah.
but maybe we've come back around with a new perspective.
Okay.
Because it's not just about tricks, right?
No, it's about the artistry.
Okay.
It's about the choices that a writer makes.
To try to create an experience.
And maybe those choices aren't always about,
Right or wrong.
it's just about what.
Feels true.
I think that's a great way to put it.
I think that's a great place to leave it, actually.
Yeah.
To anybody who's listening who's,
Intrigued, I guess.
take up some Carver
Both the, the famous stuff and the beginners.
and just see what you think.
See what speaks to you. Yeah.
And then go check out those other authors that we were talking about.
Yeah. Expand your horizons a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been fun.
This was great.
Thanks for geeking out with me about Raymond Carver.
Happy to do it.
And to everyone listening, until next time, happy reading.